Hello and welcome to the National Inventor Club. My name is Brian Freed and we are in August 2024. I know the hot topic is, oh my goodness, where did the summer go? But you know what? It's still hot here in National Inventor Club, so let's get started. We have Pete Mehravari, right? He and I met last year at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office when he had a role directly in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and we had Inventor Day. So we had a bunch of inventors, and he was one of the speakers, and he mesmerized our audience and the inventors that came, especially the picture of him with his SWAT team going into some warehouse that was copyright infringing on a USA company. And everybody keeps talking about that. And Pete and I kept in touch. I know now he's in a different role, and he is the Director of Policy and Legal Affairs for the International IP Alliance, and he'll explain what that is. But Pete, thank you so much. I'm glad we kept in touch, and now you are our main guest speaker tonight on National Inventor Club with some great information. So if you could just start off by introducing yourself, and we'll get the slide up, and we have some great information for everybody, and if you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, one, thanks for having me. It's great to be on this program, and I know how much you support inventors all across the U.S., so it's great to be here tonight. So I'm going to do a quick intro on myself, and then I'm going to kind of tell some stories about some of my work in the field, working with inventors and entrepreneurs to protect their competitive advantages. So again, my name is Pete. I started working on IP issues about 20 years ago. I was a electrical engineer who didn't like to do math, but I love technology. I love the learning about it, and I love the passion of inventors. And so what I did was I became a patent attorney and worked in the private sector for a number of years with startups, entrepreneurs, taking their inventions and protecting them with patents. But I wanted to have a bigger impact. And so I joined the U.S. government, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I was a patent examiner for a few years, but then joined our policy office, where I could help shape both U.S. domestic and also foreign intellectual property rights laws and enforcement to make sure that when a U.S. company took their inventions overseas, that they could also be protected. As part of that role, one of my jobs was I actually moved overseas and was the U.S. government's lead foreign diplomat on intellectual property issues for the Middle East, North Africa. So for 5 years, I lived in Kuwait and in the United Arab Emirates. And in that time, helped about 2,000 different U.S. companies on a wide range of intellectual property protection matters. And so from there, then I went back to the USPTO, was the director of our Global IP Academy. And then just about 3 months ago, moved back to the private sector, where I get to represent the U.S. creative industry on intellectual property issues overseas. So like the Motion Picture Association, Recording Industry Association of America, film, books, TV, video games. My job now is to advocate for them. So it's been an exciting 20-year intellectual property journey. But I'm really excited to kind of get back to that initial part that drove me into IP, which is working with startups, working with inventors. And so our goal today is that by the end of our discussion, I want you to be able to take a look at your company, your invention, and know how to protect it. And I just start talking about competitive advantage. What is your competitive advantage? And let's start from there and then move to IP. So for today's discussion, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about taking your competitive advantage, protecting it, and commercializing it.
Pete, I just want to mention that this is so important for us. There's so many different ways that we can look at what we come up with and to protect it. And Pete's kind of seen it all. And there's some valuable information in these slides. Some of it may not necessarily pertain to you at this moment, but a later slide might. So pay attention and see if you can get something out of it. That's why we have Pete on. He's an amazing guest with some great information to share with us. So sit back and let's hear what Pete has to say.
Thanks, Brian. And just a preview, there's only 7 substantive slides, so it's nothing too
Perfect.
crazy. And our goal is really just to give you the tools after today's talk to go back, relook at your invention, your business concept, and we'll give you 3 easy steps to do to figure out how to identify, prioritize, and protect your competitive advantage. So I call it strategic intellectual property capture. And this is the process, again, of looking at your business, looking at your invention, asking, why is this competitive? Why is someone going to go and buy your product over someone else's? And that's what we want to protect. So 3 steps: identify, prioritize, protect. Step 1, this is probably one of the most important steps, because oftentimes I'll talk to a business or a company and they'll say, look, Pete, we have a patent, and patents are the most important type of intellectual property. And again, as a former patent nerd back in the day, I'm at that point, I agreed. But then as I saw other businesses and companies, oftentimes the competitive advantage wasn't actually the most important one, was the patent, but it was a number of things. And we'll talk about how to prioritize that on step 2. But step 1 is so important because you can't prioritize and protect what you don't know. So step 1, you have to identify every single piece of intellectual property or competitive advantage that your company has. Again, it could be your brand or logo. It could be that new invention. It could be a design or content that you're using on your app. Anything that you're creating, anything you're investing in that makes you more competitive against someone else, list it out. Just make a list.
So you're talking about patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, plant patents, whatever, design patents, whatever it is.
Everything, Brian.
See what you can kind of compile to have that well-rounded protection.
Absolutely. I mean, and it even goes beyond that. I mean, if you're a business that is selling a product, I mean, the people that you're selling it to, your clients, that list by itself is a competitive advantage. Because let's say that you have a list of 1,000 sort of customers, and that you know these customers need your product every 2 years. Well, knowing that knowledge, you can go out there and find those customers, sell it to them very quickly. If you lose that customer list to a competitor, that competitor can quickly come to your market and figure out ways to compete against you. So it's not just a new invention. It's not just the brand, not just the quality of your product, but anything that if you lost it, a competitor could come up and take away part of your business. That's a competitive advantage, and that needs to be protected. So there are really 2 types of these types of competitive advantages when it comes to protecting with intellectual property. There's the type of intellectual property that you would register to get protection. So for invention, you want to get a patent, and so you register with the US Patent Trademark Office, file an application, get a patent to protect that invention. With your brand, you'd go and try to register for a trademark. If it's creative content, you'd want to get a copyright registration, but you'd want to enforce your rights. But as both Brian and I mentioned, there's some things that you can't register, like a trade secret. There's no trade secret registration. There's a legal process to protect it. And in some cases, even like what's your supply chains? What's the way that you hire the best people? These are things that make you competitive. Find ways to protect that information from getting out. So again, step 1, identify. Again, you can't prioritize or protect what you don't know. Again, it could be as simple as a instruction manual for your product. And I'll tell you a story at the end of today's why that is actually important. And then the last part of the slide, very important link there is the IP identifier at the USPTO.gov website. This is a great way for you to go through some questions and figure out what types of intellectual property competitive advantage you have. Great resource. I just updated it recently. Really good tool. And also you can translate into different languages as well. It's a great way to figure out what are all your products.
Great. That IP identifier is gold. I know that if you didn't take it down, you could take it down now, but definitely take advantage of the USPTO's IP identifier tool. It's really helpful. That was the link was on the USPTO site, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. Great.
All right. So step 1, identify. Step 2, prioritize. Again, most companies, startups, entrepreneurs don't have unlimited resources or money, so you can't just go out and protect every single piece of intellectual property, every competitive advantage you have. So part of it is figuring out what is that competitive advantage that if you lost it, your company is done. And so figure out what you can lose, what you can't lose, what's the cost to get that competitive advantage back, and is it even possible to get it back? So once you again have that list, just simply prioritize which are the most important ones. And I'll give this sort of example of how do you prioritize. If you don't do it correctly, what happens? So I like to look at it like you're going out and picking fruit. In this case, let's use an apple tree. You look at the apple tree, each of the apples, that's a competitive advantage, and you want to protect as many pieces of competitive advantage as you can. Well, when you pick apples, you want to pick the ripe ones and ones that you can reach easily. Because in some cases, an apple might not be ripe, and you keep pulling it, and you pull it, and finally you pull it off the tree, and all the apples shake, and all the ripe ones fall off to the ground. So maybe you want to make sure you're only picking the ripe pieces of competitive advantage, ones that you can actually protect, actually secure. Maybe there's something that is just so hard to protect. So there's that apple that's on the top of the tree. It's beautiful, but in order to get to it, you're climbing past all the other apples and you're knocking them all onto the floor. Was the value of you going after that one very difficult competitive advantage worth losing all the rest? And I'll give you another example very quickly about the company Apple. Again, using the same type of theme here. Let's say Apple goes out and they invent a new camera for their new smartphone. And again, it's a camera, so it's invention, so you want to get a patent on it. What happens if Apple forgets to get a patent on that smartphone camera? Well, what's the cost of Apple going to have to recoup to get a new, better camera to beat out its competitors? Maybe it takes a couple years, maybe a few $100 million to develop a new camera. You know what? It's bad. It's going to be frustrating. It's a loss that they didn't protect that competitive advantage. You might say, Pete, patents are the most important piece of intellectual property. You must protect the inventions with patents. Well, what happens if Apple forgets to protect their trademarks? So in trademarks in the US, you have to renew them every 10 years. As long as you use it, you can keep renewing it. What happens if Apple forgets to renew their trademark?
Wow.
And someone else steals it? What's the value of Apple's trademark to their company? It's not just on that one smartphone. It's on all their phones, all their computers, every product they have has the Apple logo. So in this case, the trademark is actually the most important competitive advantage to Apple. It's not a patent. It's not computer code. It's that brand that over years they have been developing.
After a certain amount of time, Pete, doesn't it kind of get recognition or something that really nobody can file, whether they continue to file or not?
Yeah, I mean, there are types of famous marks where over time around the world you can build up just this brand recognition. But there are many cases in countries where if you don't register or don't file in time, that you can lose it. And so if that brand is actually the most important part of your company, maybe that's where you put that investment into protecting.
Understood. You know what, also, Pete, there's so many different perspectives on intellectual property out there. And for us as independent inventors, maybe we're further along and we're businesses that are listening or watching this. If you have a chance to get some intellectual property protection to give you that competitive advantage, in a way, it kind of opens the door for more opportunity to be able to have that amount of time to almost monopolize the market with your intellectual property. And also, if you are looking to license it, if you're going to have a patent, most of the time it needs to be issued. It can also be pending, depending on the company. But you're giving that company a competitive advantage with your intellectual property. If you don't have any, then what do they need you for? They could do it themselves.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Brian, absolutely. And even to a sort of point with that, I mean, think about if you are company A and company B who are going to a potential investor, and the competitive advantage of the investor is to actually have intellectual property rights, assets. And let's say company A spends $20,000 on getting 2 patents, whereas company B spends $5,000 getting 3 or 4 trademarks, 5 or 6 copyrights, and a bunch of trade secrets where there's no money involved into it. They come to that same investor. Company A has 2 assets. Company B has 15 assets. The competitive advantage there could be more assets that have protection through intellectual property, and then investor might be more willing to go for company B because they've protected all their different types of competitive advantage in a more strategic way. So things like that can be how you prioritize. what IP, what competitive advantage to protect. So identify, prioritize. Step 3, protect. So think about that most important piece of intellectual property. There could be different ways to protect it. You want in maybe multiple ways to protect. One speaker early on talked about design patents. So if that engine, for example, maybe had a great design on it, you could protect it that way, plus the trade secret, plus the branding. Multiple ways to protect that one competitive advantage. Other least important ones, maybe you do a defensive publishing, a way to stop other people from getting patent protection. Or you just might know, I'm going to risk it, but it's a business decision because it's a low important IP. For example, you design a graphic for your website. You don't spend the time to get a copyright on that design. Someone steals it, copies it. Well, what's the cost to create a new design for that website? Probably not that much. So probably low important IP. Put the money in something more important. So you have your different tiers: high important, medium important, low important. You put different levels of investment of how to protect these competitive advantages. And then the last step, priorities change, competitive advantage change. Make sure you're routinely reevaluating the priorities of all your competitive advantages. Make sure that maybe this year it's really the invention, but as your brand develops, maybe that branding becomes more important. And so reevaluating what's the most important competitive advantage and figure out new ways to protect it with intellectual property.
Look, Pete, many of us as inventors, when we're coming up with an idea, we're not sure 100% yet. Maybe we're dabbling, we make a prototype, we file a provisional patent application, and then we kind of test the market to see if it's something that we should move forward with or not. And then we explore our options. Is it something that's patentable or not? And if so, we have the option potentially of manufacturing or licensing to earn royalties. So what's your take on provisional patent applications? Where is that in these tiers? I mean, it's a start, but many inventors think that it's actually a patent. It's just a filing date. But what's your take on that? Because a lot of us do start off with a provisional patent application.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really great tool that actually puts the U.S. ahead of a lot of other countries when it provides a cheaper way to at least get your foot in the door. One of the things that we do see is that, I mean, whatever you put in that provisional application, if you want to get a non-provisional afterwards, like the real application, that same information has to be in there. So if you just leave out a lot of stuff in the original filing, you're going to have to go back and file a new application with all the new info. So making sure that first application has all the info you want to protect is so important.
And keep it broad. Yep.
But again, put as much detail as you want in it. But again, it's a great way. Again, if your competitive advantage at the time of filing that is simply this invention, you have nothing else, this is a great way to give yourself 12 months before you file a non-provisional, and then the actual patent process will start.
Great.
So that's, great point, Brian. Again, it's a good way, it's a cheap way to at least give yourself an extra year before getting into the real process. So the last part is, again, you can do this. It's a very simple process. The identify, prioritize, protect. You can make a template out of it. You can take it to your company. If you're advising other people, you can help them do the same process. Again, you're simply listing all of your competitive advantages, prioritizing them, and then you don't need to know how to protect them themselves. But when you go to see your patent attorney, your IP attorney, your trademark attorney, you tell them these are the most important competitive advantages. They won't know. They don't know what your business is. They don't know what's important to you. They don't know, if I lose this competitive advantage, my 45 employees have to fire them. They know, oh, this is an invention, patent. This is a brand, trademark. It'll be your job to tell them, these are my most important ones. Please protect them extra. And then these less important ones, we don't need to waste money on those. So they'll do the protection part. You'll do the business side of it part.
Pete, usually when somebody comes to me with an idea, or the audience out there, when you're working with an idea, it's really important for you to know your competitors. So you came up with this idea, and this is what Pete's point is here. You come up with an idea. What's making your idea different than the other ones that are out there? What competitive advantage are you going to have in the market compared to the other products out there that are similar? And that's where you have some options of either licensing or manufacturing. But it's really important for you to know what's going to make yours different when you're pitching somebody, whether it's on a package design or if it's a sell sheet or if it's a pitch to a potential licensee? Why should they do business with you, or why should they rent the rights to your intellectual property? Well, this is what you tell them, that your IP is going to give them this competitive advantage in the market.
Perfect, Brian. I mean, it's kind of great way to sum it up. And then to my last slide, very quickly again, everything I've talked about before relates to domestic markets, but also overseas market. Here's the picture that Brian was mentioning with me and my IP attaché best.
We love that.
Overseas. But the U.S. government has some great free resources when it comes to helping U.S. companies take their businesses abroad. We have the U.S. IP attaché program. So I was one of the IP attachés. There's 13 of them around the world. And it's a free resource. Their emails are on the website, uspto.gov, search IP attachés. Their job is to talk with companies of all sizes. What's the landscape? What are you seeing? There's other different websites at USPTO about IP in China, UK, other places. And then the other place I want to mention is the US Department of Commerce. They have their stopfakes.gov website. That's a good place for some IP toolkits based on different industries, but also on countries. And then finally, the US Foreign Commercial Service. There are commerce officials in most of our embassies and consulates around the world. They are just incredible resources for you to reach out to about doing business in those markets. They oftentimes work directly with the IP attachés, give you a full business perspective. So just some of the resources in the US government for taking your businesses overseas.
That's
and then, Brian, we have time for the last story.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the last story was I had a US aftermarket auto company that made these really beautiful exhaust systems come out to the Middle East. Unfortunately, I was not able to talk to them before they came out. And so when they came out, they actually didn't have IP protection. And so I was talking with them a bit, and I was like, oh, so just tell me about your business. And like, oh, like we make these beautiful exhaust systems. It's the same technology, been around for a long time, but we use like really high quality products. They last a long time, but we also make these super cool designs of the exhaust system. So they're just beautiful. And so when you put them in your car, it's a work of art. And so they were out here in the Middle East for a trade show. And oftentimes the IP attachés work with US companies at trade shows, making sure they know the landscape. So I come back next day and they kind of like come up to me very quickly. I was like, Pete, there's a exhibit about 4 or 5 tables down from us that's copying our exhaust systems, like verbatim, like it copied everything. And so I'm like, okay, like let's go. So we stealthily walk over and we're looking around and taking pictures, not really covertly, but like of the other company's products. And yeah, they had just ripped off the US company's like beautiful designs. We had one of our other contacts go and like take a look at them, and the workmanship in that product was just so bad. Like the materials were awful, and so like people be confused if this exhaust system was put into a car thinking that it was the US company's product. And so one thing about IP rights is they're territorial. So that company had a US patent, a US trademark. They had a US design patent on the look and feel of it. But when they went to the Middle East, in the country we're in, they had not gone out and registered for protection. And so in that country, those US IP rights, meaningless. One type of intellectual property right that is very interesting is copyrights. So when you create a creative work, you get protection for that work the second you put it into a tangible media. So if this company, they wrote this beautiful like manual of how to use the exhaust, how to install the exhaust system. And once you do that, you actually have copyright protection in all countries that are members of it's called the Berne Convention Treaty, which is almost every country in the world, including this country that they were in. And so it turned out that these counterfeiters had actually copied everything, including their instruction manuals. And so because we were able to demonstrate to that local government that the copyright rights protected them in this country, we were able to get the exhibitors to throw out the infringing people. But again, because we went through that whole system of what's your competitive advantage, what is every single piece, we identified every piece of a competitive advantage that had including that instruction manual, one of those competitive advantages finally was able to get the infringement to go away.
Wow.
So I'm saying you have to identify every single piece of competitive advantage you have, because you might not know when that piece will actually come to play that can help you out. So in this case, it wasn't the patent, wasn't the brand, wasn't the design, it was that little instruction manual that they had developed.
Oh, and we shared that IP identifier tool from the US Patent and Trademark Office that you can actually see between all the things that are going on in your business. Because when you're coming up with an idea, it's a business. Find those things that are protected or that you could build your intellectual property or IP protection. Another kind of tactic that I learned from a patent attorney is to file a technical drawing copyright. And if you're saying that, and I didn't realize that you're protected in all these other countries from this copyright, to have a technical drawing of your patent or your product could be, not necessarily patent, I said, but of your drawing of your product could be something that you may be able to get a copyright from or of. But please, I'm not a patent attorney or agent. I'm not sharing that. It's just from what I've heard, you can do your own due diligence and make your own decision. But that's really interesting. It's great to know that we have those protections out there. And as inexpensively as a copyright is, and I think a copyright's less than $100. So that's some great information. So thank you so much for this.
Pleasure, Brian. Again, working with you and working with inventors, again, it's one of my favorite things to do. So anytime that we can help you, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Pete. We will keep in touch, and thank you for your support with our audience at National Inventor Club, and we will see you again soon. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, all.
Thank you. All right. Well, that wraps up another month of the National Inventor Club. We have some great events that are happening, and you can continue to be a part of them. You can go to the Inventor Smart Community app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. We have a long list of events, and thanks to Andy and Samantha and Sean and all the active engagers that are in the app, thank you so much for making all of this possible. Thank you so much, and keep making your inventions a reality. Keep moving forward, and we're here to help you. We'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.